Okay, so the single most important concept in corporate law is that there's a limitation of liability that protects the shareholders when the corporation is sued. All right. Now, for corporations to hold a shareholder liable, that's the exception to the rule. It can happen, but it can only happen in certain circumstances. And on this slide, we list those circumstances. Now it says factors that can lead to courts piercing the corporate veil. Well, that's a colloquialism that refers to when a court says, okay, you're a shareholder, you're supposed to have limited liability, but for this reason, you forfeit that and you can be held liable. All right. So these are circumstances in which a shareholder can be held liable for something that the corporation has done. All right. First exception. If I don't know that I'm doing business with a corporation, all right, and this honestly goes for any entity that has limited liability, right? You have to give notice that your entity has limited liability in its name. That's why a limited partnership has to have LP in their name. A limited liability partnership has to have LLP. If I'm operating as an LLC, that has to be in my name. If I'm operating as a corporation, I have to indicate that. It could be Corp, Incorporated, INC, period. But you have to let your business partners know that you are dealing with a corporation. All right? That's the first way. That failure to do that can allow the individual to be liable. All right? A sham corporation, right? Corporation that was set up mainly for a fraudulent purpose. All right. Or if you don't comply with capitalism requirements, minimum capitalization at inception or when the corporation is set up. All right. That's called thin capitalization. Any of those will allow shareholders to be held liable. All right. Or the corporation is formed to evade an existing obligation. Okay. So if I am operating as a general partnership and I cause an injury and I say, okay, I'm going to incorporate, because to be quite honest, typically you can incorporate quicker than a lawsuit could be filed and go through the litigation process. All right. But if I form a corporation to avoid an existing legal obligation, I'm being sued. Right. Well, forming the corporation doesn't dispel or dispose of any obligations existing prior to the corporation's formation. All right. Statutory corporate formality is not followed. This is why it's difficult to form a corporation without an attorney. Anybody forming a corporation is going to hire an attorney who does this, right? Because if you do not follow the procedure and process for forming a corporation, then that means the shareholders could be held liable, all right? This is the most common reason. It's called commingling is the key word here. A corporation has to have its own bank account. All right. And the transactions need to be kept separate from owners, shareholders. All right. If it looks like I am paying personal expenses, if I'm a majority shareholder and I'm paying my rent or I'm selling corporate assets to myself for low prices. That's commingling, right? And I use a case here, and I'll just nutshell it. This was J-Mart case, a Georgia case, where the one person owned substantially all of the shares, I think over 80% of the shares of a corporation, and that person was also the CEO, right? And so an audit of the financial records showed that the owner was paying rent from a corporate account, was using a corporate American Express card for personal affairs, groceries, and discretionary shopping and things like that. Also, there was a car, a Cadillac of all things, that was property of the corporation, that the corporation sold to the majority shareholder for $1. Those types of things, when the courts find those types of things, it appears that the corporate form is being used to manipulate the limited liability, and so courts will do away with the limitation of liability. All right. So just 2 slides here, but this is a big deal. This represents a failure of the corporate form when owners are held liable for corporate liabilities.